Welcome back to the channel. Here you'll find the fastest updates on breaking news, shocking secrets, and dramatic predictions for times. The young and the restless. Who will betray whom? What secrets are about to be revealed? And what horrific tragedy awaits the characters in Genoa City? Subscribe, turn on notifications, and join us to discover the unmissable developments right now. Welcome back to our channel on this beautiful day as we dive deep into the latest dramatic developments unfolding in Genoa City. The emotional stakes have never been higher, and today we are unpacking a storyline that promises to leave a lasting impact on the lives of some of our most beloved characters. Let us transition immediately into the heart of the impending storm. The atmosphere in Genoa City has grown increasingly suffocating as the intersection of relentless corporate ambition and fragile human relationships reaches a catastrophic boiling point. At the very center of this brewing storm are Billy Abbott and Sally Spectra, two individuals who have desperately tried to build a sanctuary together amidst the chaos of their respective lives. However, the ghosts of their pasts and the overwhelming pressure of ongoing family wars have slowly begun to erode the foundation of their romance. Billy has found himself entirely consumed by a dark, manic obsession with reclaiming Chancellor Industries, a fixation born from the traumatic discovery of his mother Jill's terminal illness and her devastating secret pact with Kane Ashby. The realization that his own mother deemed him too unstable to protect the family legacy has triggered a profound psychological spiral within Billy, pushing him to prove his worth through increasingly ruthless and erratic maneuvers. This desperate need for validation and control has blinded him to the collateral damage he is causing, transforming him into a corporate weapon that strikes without regard for the people standing in his immediate vicinity. Sally Spectra, meanwhile, has been navigating her own treacherous emotional landscape, desperately seeking stability after a series of profound. The shocking return of Elena carrying Adam Newman's child, Ava, completely shattered Sally's previous romantic and professional entanglements, leaving her feeling deeply isolated and entirely adrift. In the wake of that devastation, Sally poured every ounce of her remaining strength, ambition, and hope into Spectre Charles, a new business venture that represented her ultimate chance at independence and security. Billy was supposed to be her anchor in this turbulent sea, the one person who offered her a safe harbor away from the toxic manipulations of the Newman. She trusted him implicitly, allowing herself to be vulnerable and believing that they were building a unified future. Unfortunately, Sally completely underestimated the sheer magnitude of Billy's obsession with Chancellor Industries, failing to recognize that a man fighting a war for his birthright is fundamentally incapable of providing a safe haven for anyone else. The devastating catalyst for their current crisis occurred when Billy, driven entirely by his blinding need to outmaneuver Kane Ashby and Lily Winters, made a unilateral and unforgivable decision. In a desperate bid to secure leverage in the impending corporate war for Chancellor, Billy ruthlessly sacrificed Sally's latest venture. He manipulated the assets and strategic partnerships of Spectre Charles, using Sally's hard-won company as a disposable pawn to advance his own agenda against his mother's chosen successor. He executed this sabotage with cold, calculated precision, entirely rationalizing his actions as a necessary casualty in a much larger, more important war. In his fractured state of mind, Billy convinced himself that once he secured Chancellor, he could easily rebuild whatever he had broken of Sally's dream. He failed to comprehend that he was not just dismantling a business, he was annihilating the very trust and security that Sally had desperately relied upon to survive in Genoa City. When the truth of Billy's machinations finally came to light, the psychological impact on Sally was nothing short of catastrophic. The discovery that her venture had been deliberately sabotaged by the man she loved sent shockwaves of profound betrayal through her entire being. She realized with horrifying clarity that Billy had looked at her life's work, at the fragile stability she had bled to create, and deemed it entirely expendable. The trauma of her past, of constantly being used, discarded, and treated as collateral damage by powerful men, rushed back with agonizing force. Sally felt a sickening sense of déjà vu, recognizing that despite all her efforts to escape the toxic dynamics of her past, she had once again anchored herself to a man who would gladly burn her world to the ground if it served his own ego. The betrayal was absolute, severing the deep emotional bond she thought they shared and leaving her entirely isolated in a city that had never truly accepted her. The setting for their inevitable confrontation was heavily steeped in shadows and an oppressive, suffocating silence. The penthouse, once a sanctuary filled with warmth and shared dreams, now felt like a cold, sterile battlefield. The physical distance between Billy and Sally mirrored the immense emotional chasm that had suddenly violently ripped open. Billy paced the room with a frantic, defensive energy, his mind still partially trapped in the corporate war room, completely unprepared for the emotional annihilation that was about to take place. Sally, in stark contrast, stood absolutely still, her posture rigid and her eyes hollowed out by an exhaustion that went far deeper than mere physical fatigue. The air in the room was thick with unspoken resentment, creating a suffocating tension that promised to shatter everything they had built the moment the silence was finally broken. As the confrontation erupted, Sally methodically and mercilessly laid out the wreckage of her business, detailing exactly how Billy's obsession had systematically dismantled. She painted a vivid picture of his betrayal, stripping away all of his corporate justifications and forcing him to look at the raw, bleeding wound he had inflicted upon her life. Billy immediately adopted a defensive posture, frantically attempting to rationalize his actions as temporary setbacks for a greater, ultimate victory. He argued that the war for Chancellor required impossible sacrifices, completely failing to grasp that he had sacrificed the wrong thing. His desperate attempts to explain his strategy only further alienated Sally, proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that he was entirely disconnected from the emotional reality of his actions. He was speaking the language of corporate warfare while she was bleeding out from a fatal wound to her heart. The argument quickly escalated from a dispute over business ethics into a brutal, unsparing dissection of Billy's fundamental character flaws. Sally tore down the illusion of their stability, exposing the tragic irony of it. She pointed out that in his desperate, manic attempt to prove his mother wrong, he was actually proving her entirely right. Jill had locked him out of Chancellor because she believed he was too erratic, too unstable, and too self-destructive to be trusted with something precious. By destroying Sally's venture to feed his obsession, Billy had demonstrated exactly the kind of reckless instability that Jill had feared. Sally's tears were not just born of frustration, but of a profound, heartbreaking realization that the man she loved was trapped in a perpetual cycle of self-sabotage, destined to destroy everything beautiful in his life whenever he felt threatened or insecure. It was in the midst of this devastating emotional autopsy that the true gravity of the situation was finally revealed, shifting the entire paradigm of their relationship. With a voice trembling from the weight of unspeakable sorrow, Sally dropped a revelation that instantly sucked all the oxygen out of the room. She was pregnant. The news hit Billy with the force of a physical blow, completely shattering his defensive posture and leaving him staring at her in absolute paralyzed shock. The sudden introduction of a new life into this incredibly toxic equation altered the atmosphere instantly, transforming their bitter dispute into a matter of life and death. The realization that he was about to become a father again, right at the exact moment he had completely destroyed the trust of the mother of his child, sent Billy into a sudden, horrifying psychological freefall. However, Sally did not deliver this news as a beacon of hope or a desperate plea for reconciliation. Instead, she presented it as the ultimate tragic casualty of his action. She explained with agonizing clarity the terrifying maternal calculus she had been forced to perform in the wake of his betrayal. She absolutely refused to bring an innocent child into a world defined by uncertainty, corporate crossfire, and emotional neglect. She painted a harrowing picture of what a child's life would look like with a father who was entirely consumed by vengeance, a man who would gladly sacrifice his family's stability to win a boardroom battle. Sally's protective instincts had been violently awakened, and she had come to the devastating conclusion that the environment Billy had created was fundamentally unsafe for a child to grow and thrive in. The climax of the confrontation brought forth an unthinkable ultimatum that would forever alter the trajectory of their lives. Driven to the absolute brink of despair, Sally voiced the darkest, most agonizing consideration a mother could. She declared with absolute chilling finality that she was seriously considering terminating the pregnancy. The sheer emotional violence of this revelation hung in the air like a guillotine, threatening to sever the final thread of their connection. This was not a threat born out of malice or a desire to punish Billy, but rather a profoundly desperate, protective measure. Sally felt entirely cornered by the instability of their relationship, believing that sparing her child from a chaotic, broken existence was the only merciful choice left to her. The agony of feeling forced into such a horrific corner by the man who was supposed to protect her radiated from Sally, filling the room with an unbearable, suffocating. Billy's psychological collapse in the face of this declaration was absolute and terrifying. The towering walls of his ambition and his desperate need for corporate vindication crumbled instantly, leaving him entirely exposed to the horrifying reality of what his obsession had cost him. The war for Chancellor Industries, the blackmail from Kane Ashby, the perceived betrayal by his mother, all of it suddenly meant absolutely nothing in the face of losing his unborn. He was forced to look into the terrifying mirror Sally held up to him, and the reflection staring back was that of a monster who had prioritized his own bruised ego over the lives of the people he claimed to love. The ghosts of his past failures, of every time he had blown up his own life just as he was on the verge of happiness, rushed back to haunt him with deafening volume. He was drowning in a sea of his own making, entirely paralyzed by the catastrophic consequences of his own reckless ambition. A paralyzing silence followed Sally's devastating declaration, a quiet so profound that it felt like the entire world had simply stopped spinning. The emotional wreckage of their relationship lay scattered across the room, far too extensive and deeply damaged to ever be easily repaired. Billy stood frozen at the precipice of losing everything that truly mattered, his mind desperately scrambling for a way to undo the unforgivable, while knowing deep down that some lines, once crossed, can never be uncrossed. The agonizing uncertainty of Sally's final decision loomed over them like a dark storm cloud, leaving their future hanging by the thinnest, most fragile of threads. As Sally finally turned and walked toward the door, leaving Billy entirely alone with his demons and the horrifying echoes of her ultimatum, the ultimate question remained agonizingly unanswered. Had Billy Abbott's relentless, destructive obsession finally pushed the woman he loved past the point of no return, forcing her to make a tragic choice that would haunt them both for the rest of their lives?